If you're on the cold calling hamster wheel, I get it. I've been there making cold calls for hours and hours and hours just to get chewed out, not generate any leads, not get any appointments, and then sit there and scratch your head and say, what am I doing this for? We've all been there. But I'm going to walk you through why that is happening. And then most importantly, what are we going to do to fix it? I'll teach you how to have great conversations in this video such that people actually thank you for calling, believe it or not. I'll teach you how to communicate so that you never get objections ever again. And then why you're here is what I'm going to focus primarily this conversation, which is how do you set high quality listing appointments so that you can get in front of your ideal prospects. Now, as we get into this video, there's a lot of different techniques that I'm going to teach you, a lot of different scripts I'm going to introduce you to. So if you want to follow along, there's a link in the description. You can grab it right now. It has all my brand new scripts on it on how you can generate more leads and set more appointments. If you want access to that, I'll put a link in the description. So let's jump into this conversation so you can get off the hamster wheel and start making insane amounts of money in this business of real estate sales. So if an agent is using scripts that are designed to try to get prospects to say yes or to agree to something, it's no wonder why most agents are struggling with their conversations during a cold call and why most of their prospects resist and why most of them give them objections. So let's establish what's going on first, and then we'll talk about what do we have to do about it? What can we do about it? And so that someone who's watching this can walk away and say, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. Let me try that technique. So here's what's going on. There's something called psychological reactance. And so when we try to convince somebody to do something against their will, resistance goes up. It's what happens when you ask a kid to clean their room. They always are met with resistance. Yeah. It's like what happens when you tell the kid, hey, listen, don't touch the hot stove. The motivation to touch the hot stove increases. Well, the same thing is happening in adults, right? There's all kinds of studies, all kinds of research. I mean, there's a book, I've got a book back there somewhere on reactance. It's about this thick. And so, I mean, people feel it all the time. Like, I'll give the audience an example of this, and I'll challenge the audience. So if you're listening or watching this, try this. Close your eyes for a second. And whatever you do, whatever you think about, do not think about your car. Don't think about how it smells. Don't think about the interior. Don't think about the steering wheel. Don't think about the wheels. Don't think about what color it is. And what's happening to the brain automatically, it's a reflex response. The brain is automatically starting to think about the thing we tell them not to think about. Okay, fine. So this is reactance. The second thing that also happens when we are talking to a prospect who is already on the defensive, right? Most of the time, we are looked at, the perception is, oh, you're a salesperson. I need to guard myself against you. So the other problem is with using language, Ben, and I know you know this is for the audience, that has yes orientation also elicits something called perceived bias. That if I ask a prospect, and in this case, you, Ben, let me stop by and I'll show you what I'm doing to sell homes. That language elicits this perceived bias in that the prospect says, well, yeah, of course you're saying that. I mean, you're a commissioned salesperson. Of course you want to come over. You want to try and sell me. You want to try to get me to list my house with you. And so both of those things is what happens when people go for yes. And what we teach agents that we work with is the fact that yes, the agreement around yes actually lives in the land of no, which we're going to spend the rest of the episode unpacking. Anything you want to add until we get before we get into it?
Well, before I make a point, why would you say that this used to work and now it's harder to get and win a deal or get a sale focusing on yes versus no? What changed?
Well, I don't know that it has changed, because I think what's happened is if you do enough of anything, it will work. So if you're referring to, well, people have been using scripts that were pretty bad for a long time and they succeed with them. If that's what you're getting at, they will still succeed with them. You see, most coaches and most trainers will say, well, prospecting just play, it's just a numbers game. Okay, fine. Part of that is true. But what also is true is that if you grow and develop a skill set that is more effective when talking to human beings, you can get more done without having to work so hard, which is the point. So if the idea is that, well, yeah, there's all kinds of scripts out there, a lot of bad ones, yet people are making money setting appointments, going on listing appointments, using these crap scripts that I see every day that people send me, they will work if you do enough of it. And I don't know if that's what you're asking. And they'll continue to work. My argument is, listen, if it's taking you right now, call it 60, 70, 80 contacts right now to generate a lead, by doing what we're going to teach the audience in this episode, we can bring that down. We see our students doing 10 to 1, getting really solid, motivated seller lead for every 10 people they talk to. Does that make sense?
100%. I would just add, if you're the type of person that is struggling prospecting and getting like really harsh feedback, mastering this will make prospecting more enjoyable. It'll allow you to be, the rejection will be a lot softer. So if you feel like, man, I just cannot handle this type of rejection, I wasn't built for this, I don't have enough confidence right now, learning these skills will put you in a place where you can maybe, I don't know, maybe you even get to the same spot that you would have the other way. But gosh, you will build so much confidence along the way that it'll make it easier, which in result will build your confidence and your results will follow.
It's a great point, and the way that we teach people to communicate over the phone while prospecting is to eliminate rejection. And it's not maybe 100%, but damn near close. That if you can communicate the way that we're going to teach you in this episode, you nailed it, right? I mean, you can pretty much eliminate objections and eliminate the rejection that you're getting, because we're going to get in front of it. We're going to get in front of it. We're going to teach you a way of communication that nobody else in the real estate space is teaching, and it's really, really effective, and it makes prospecting fun. So here's the reality: is that when we are communicating with human beings, we just talked about reactance, we talked about perceived bias, and why these scripts elicit that type of response, right? Because people can feel when they're being sold. They can feel it. And so when they feel it, they're going to resist it. And so the goal of a prospecting phone call is to A, find the truth, and B, find people who have real motivation, real motive to act. If you do not change your language, you will not be able to get any of those two. No one will tell you the truth. You'll get a bunch of counterfeit yeses. That's the other big problem, is if you're so attached to getting some form of agreement around yes, you force the prospect to give you counterfeit yeses so they can stop the pain, get off the phone, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what we call happy ears. People that use these really, really bad scripts, the prospect learns quickly, okay, this very pushy, very annoying salesperson, the only way they're going to, what's the fastest way to get rid of a salesperson? Tell them you're interested.
That's right.
Tell them you're interested. Yeah, this really sounds really great. Give me a call back in a couple months. And that gets the person to say, oh, I got one. So
yeah, and how do you know if you're doing that right now? It's because you're doing that. You're getting those counterfeit yeses. You're following up with people, and guess what? They've been put into the witness protection program. They're no-showing you on appointments. They're canceling last minute. All of those pieces. That's how you know if you're doing that now.
Great point. Yeah, if you're following up with people and they never answer your calls again, which most agents say is the problem with lead follow-up, or yeah, you set appointments and then you get ghosted, or you set appointments that always cancel, that's because you're forcing someone's arm. You're forcing someone's hand. You're forcing them to say yes because you're putting them in a hole. or you're putting them in a corner rather, right? And we know a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, meaning that sure, if you badger somebody enough, sure, that's maybe if that's the way you want to sell, which is why people tell me they don't want a cold call. Because it's like, oh, I just feel sleazy and I feel slimy. Yeah, that's because you're using language that makes you feel outside of integrity. So let's introduce them to a concept that we call reverse presumptive language. So the idea here, when we talk about going for no, when we talk about agreement lives in the land of no, it's the fastest way towards the truth. Because the way in which we're going to give some examples still get people in reflex responses, but they're not thinking quick enough. So as an example of that, if I call a prospect and I use some type of permission opener and now we're in a conversation and I say, Ben, I make a lot of these phone calls and most people I talk to tell me the same thing, which I'm assuming is the case for you, which is if I brought up the idea of selling, I'm assuming like most, you've got the perfect home and you're never moving. Am I right? Now, that language is very designed to be very black and white, very absolute. And so even for the audience sake, we could test it with people, right? You want to say, it forces you, it motivates the person to say, well, no, I don't have the perfect home, or no, not forever. We use language like that on purpose as a form of agreement to strategically get prospects to tell us no, which allows us to further that conversation. See, when we ask a question like, I get the feeling that it wouldn't matter how much you could sell your home for in this market. Let's say it's an expired listing as an example. Ben, I get the feeling that even if you were presented with a perfect offer and it got you and your family off to wherever you're going, it probably wouldn't matter much, right? It's probably way too late for that. You see, it's very difficult to fight against that. And so we'll get deeper into it. But yeah, what's your thoughts?
You talk to a friend, if you present any point, people just naturally want to argue the opposite. So that's part of this too, is if you make these extreme statements like you're saying of this is your forever home, you're never going to move, people can't help but kind of push back. But they're pushing us towards the word no, but it would actually get us to a place where we would want them to be, where potentially they could be a seller. So that's the key here. It's almost disrupting the normal frequency of the motions that somebody wants to go through. Just like we talk about all the time of somebody walking into a department store, hey, can I help you? And they just reflex, like we're talking about, no, right? So we just want to kind of interrupt that, mess with it a little bit and see if we can get to the truth.
Yeah. Can you see my screen okay?
I got you. Yeah.
All right, cool. So this, I think, is a really good example of this to help the audience really, really, really help them through this. So this is a really advanced communication skill that we teach all agents that we work with, which is the difference between push and pull communication. And so what most real estate agents are taught through traditional sales scripts and traditional sales training is how to pull prospects closer to them, right? So this all starts with science, right? Newton's law of motion, which says that a body at rest will remain at rest, and a body in motion will remain in motion unless it's acted upon an external force. And for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. What does this mean? So if you can look at the image on my screen, and for those people that are listening to this, you might not be able to see this, but I'll walk you through this. So Ben, this is what you were just hitting on, which is that there's two ends of the spectrum, right? On behind the salesperson is the sale, right? It's setting the appointment, it's generating a lead, it's taking a listing, etc. Behind the prospect is no sale. And so this is what we see most often when I listen to cold calls, this tug of war. So prospect or salesperson rather, realtor in this case, is always trying to pull towards the sale. And like Mr. Newton has taught us, what would happen if somebody was pulling you naturally pull away. This is what's going on almost every single cold call. So just as like to use language as an example of what's going on here is like agents will say things like, well, why don't I just at least do some research and tell you at least how much you could sell your home for? That way you at least know. See, that's an argument. That's language that has yes orientation that is attempting to pull the prospect towards doing something. Make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
The prospect on the other end, when that language is used, they pull back. You know what? No, listen, I like I told you before, I'm just not interested. I'm not interested in doing that. Don't waste your time. That's what agents continue to hear from prospects. You know what? Don't waste your time. I'm not interested. No, I'm good. That's them pulling away. So what do we have to do to change this? Well, we have to use language that is designed to get to know by gently pushing the prospect towards no sale and allow the prospect to push back. This is the only way we can get to the truth. And so as an example, right, prospect says, well, listen, I'm not even sure if we're moving anytime soon. Instead of trying to pull them closer to the sale, we push them further away from the sale. So as an example, you might say, well, Ben, listen, that makes sense. I mean, you've got a gorgeous home. You're in a beautiful neighborhood. I mean, it sounds like everything's perfect. I mean, you're probably there forever. Am I right? And when we push the prospect towards not doing something, what we often find is that prospects respond with things like, well, I'm not saying we're never going to move. I'm not saying that we're going to be here forever. That's not what I'm suggesting. And so this is when we see prospects respond with, well, no, we're not going to be here forever. And then that allows us to further the conversation. Now, when most agents, so here's the next mistake that they make. If people heard that, well, we're not moving forever, they would jump all over that. Well, why don't I come on over, right? And then it's like feeding deer. It's like, well, you have to make very subtle movements. Otherwise, you're going to scare the prospect away. And so we can't go from, okay, man, this is really, really powerful, right? Using a permission-based opener, getting them to say, sure, I'll have this conversation. And then rather than opening up the conversation to say, well, listen, the reason why I'm calling today is to see if you're interested in selling. I mean, that's just not very effective, right? And so we're gonna alter that by opening up the conversation to not use yes orientation, but to use no orientation. This helps to lower the prospect's guard. It lowers their defenses. It's you serving the objection to the prospect and allowing the prospect to argue with you and tell you were wrong. So we call the prospect, whether you're circle prospecting for sell by owners, it doesn't matter, right? We assume that the prospect does not have what it is that we are hoping they have and allow them to tell us that we're wrong. You with me on that so far?
It's so good. We believe, and we share this all the time, is there is way more reasons why we're not going to do business together than there are reasons that we are. So why don't we just, instead of cross our fingers and hope they never bring these things up, we can serve those up to the prospect and have them argue with us why those things aren't true and why maybe potentially we could end up working together.
I know. And that is so difficult for people to realize. They can hear this intellectually, but it takes a long time to set in. How do I know that? Because it took me a long time to learn this. It took you a long time to learn that. In that people almost pretend like they're not hearing the prospect. This is the happy years, right? This is what we call mutual mystification, is that the prospects most of the time are just being polite, and the prospect is only using language that forces the person to be agreeable. It's forcing the prospect to lie. It's forcing the prospect to misdirect the salesperson. So we're doing the opposite of that. We're just getting to the truth. Let me give you another example. So oftentimes agents will ask the timing question, so they'll find somebody who says, yeah, we're thinking about doing something. Interesting. What are your timelines? Well, remember, that question is very threatening to a prospect. Because if the prospect can feel this. This is that perceived bias we talked about before, right? Well, you're asking me that question, and if I give you the answer, you're going to jump all over it. So rather than ask these questions and make these chess moves that are so obvious to the prospect, we have to reverse this, right? And so when we come to the timing part of the conversation in a cold call, we have to use language that sounds something like this. Well, Ben, listen, like we talked about before, it seems like the home's working out for you guys right now. So I know you mentioned selling, but I'm assuming that if you have this place this time next year, that's not a big deal, right? I mean, you're in no rush. And we get the prospect to say, well, yeah, I wish it was that easy. No, we've got to do something a lot sooner than that. Because when we ask that question, it's not perceived to benefit us. That's why the defenses from the prospect are eliminated. There's no reason for the prospect to be defensive because they don't feel any sales pressure, right?
That's right. And we believe all we're doing is sorting. We're not trying to come in here and convince somebody or get ammunition to use against them. All we're trying to do is get, like you just said a minute ago, the truth. That's it. So if we can just not scare the deer away, we can actually get the truth and see if this is even an opportunity in the first place.
Yeah. And so that's exactly right. And then as you further this conversation, right? So we call it dominoes, right? In the world that when we're working with an agent, we call it dominoes. You've got to knock over one domino at a time on a cold call, one step at a time, not worry about the whole thing. We're detaching from the end result, but knocking down one domino at a time such that it's a system, it's a process to follow so that the likelihood for you generating a lead or an appointment goes up dramatically. Now, when we get to
and people want to knock over the first domino and then they just want to knock the rest over or jump to the last domino. And that's the scaring the deer away. It's like, I'm just skip the next three and just pluck the last one over.
That's right. And so I'll give another example of this so people can really get this, right? And this is super powerful. I mean, here's the reality. Here's the truth. There's going to be people that listen to this episode that reject this. No, that I understand. It's very difficult for you to understand what has been taught for 50 years, and then what does the science say? What does the actual research say? And if you're new to human communication, which is what selling is, then once you study the psychology of language, you see, wow, that's interesting. What I thought I knew about selling is completely wrong. That if you're responding to objections, you already screwed up. That's the thing that traditional sales misses. They spend so much time on objection handlers that it's like the very idea of responding to objection suggests that you've already done something incorrect. If the person is resisting you, you've already screwed it up. So when we further this conversation, we talk about, okay, maybe you find somebody that has motivation to sell. Well, most people want to force their way into an appointment. I just heard, I'll leave his name out, but I was watching some video on Instagram yesterday of this script, this sales trainer guy. And, it's so salesy and it's so sleazy that I can't imagine that the conversion is very high. Thus, it probably works because you got to do 500 contacts a day and vomit this onto people enough that you find somebody that it works with. But we have to be invited over, and it has to be the prospect's idea to have us come over. Otherwise, you are forcing appointments that probably are never going to happen. Your appointment set to met ratio is probably extremely low. Or B, your conversion when you go on appointments is dog doo-doo. So that, you probably have a 20, 30% conversion. It's so low because you're forcing people. You're using old school, high pressure sales techniques to force people into saying yes against their will. You know what I mean? And so we have to be invited over. So when we're in these conversations, We have to use language like, well, listen, Ben, I don't know if this would make sense or not. You can decide. We have to use language that supports the person's autonomy. So again, they don't feel any reason to resist. We're giving the person full power. The perception of power, which is the fastest way to maintain control, is by giving it up. This is how we lower resistance. And then when we position the appointment language that we teach, we talk about the movie trailer script. We create such a high perception of value around the meeting, and then we pull it away. And so that might sound like some type of hypothetical. Well, Ben, let's just pretend you thought it was a good idea to invite me over. And when you left, you were genuinely blown away with the plan that I put in front of you. And if that were true, is there any reason why you can think of on why you wouldn't want to explore this a bit more, knowing, Ben, you're obviously a smart guy. You're not going to do or make any decisions unless you ultimately thought it made sense. Am I right? See, when we use language like that, it's very difficult for prospects to defend anything because it's fully up to them to make their own decision.
I love it. I want to make sure people don't miss what you just said too, is we're just selling the next step. We're just trying to knock over the next domino. We're not trying to go all the way for the close and win the business on the phone. All we're doing right now, and that's part of the language is super important, but also the intent of just focusing on the meeting and not whether or not we're going to work together or not yet. I think I just wanted people not to miss that.
Yeah, because people they're rushing through the process because they're so needy and they're so desperate and they're so like, I always say they act like the little boy on prom night.
Yeah,
like I'll keep it clean, right, for this, but that's how they act. And somebody shows a little tiny bit of interest, boom, they jump all over it and then they scare people away. It's like, no, just slow down. Like you've got to the phone is designed to set and is designed to get through the appointment. The appointment is when the real sales process starts. That's why it's called telemarketing. We argue all the time that prospecting is a form of marketing. It's to find people to put into your funnel. It's finding people to meet with. And the real sales happens in person. And so to your point, if people try to mix those two things and they're having conversations with potential sellers about listing their home, and what the prospect is hearing is the agent attempting to get them to decide on hiring them to list their home, it's going to destroy your conversion.
Yeah, I want to backpedal for a second. You mentioned these people you were listening to on Instagram or whatever. Something you and I talk about all the time that I want to introduce to the audience is a lot of the times those types of tactics, those types of conversation scripts, the reason that those people get away with it is because they're focused on B2B, business to business sales. And we're in the world of B2C, business to consumer. And it's just such a different conversation. And those types of tactics, that type of trust, it doesn't exist. We're not calling on a business where it's, you and I, like I said, talk about this all the time. He's sitting there all day, every day, waiting for somebody to call and pitch him on a new product. He just had a board meeting. Their whole Q4 project is to get these types of quotes, to bring in this business, change vendors. Like that's all they do every day. So if you have a clean pitch, it's direct, it's salesy, it works because those people are expecting your call. But when we call a consumer, we just have to be ready for that. It's a different language.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point. And the whole thing around being a great communicator, whether this be in person or over the phone, has to do with your ability to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
See, if they don't feel comfortable and you're not using a nurturing tonality, you see, prospects don't owe us anything. And sometimes, agents forget that. Oh, that guy was a jerk, or, what? Dude, there are no bad prospects. There's only bad salespeople. And so prospects don't owe you anything. Your job is how people respond to you is your responsibility. So Can you use the right tonality, the right pace, the right language so that people don't feel threatened having a conversation with you? That's the difference between playing the numbers game and being a highly skilled communicator. That it doesn't matter, even if somebody has no interest of selling their home, the conversation never goes south. It never ends up with it being hostile. Even with an expired listing. I was just in a workshop with agents the other day who were frustrated that, man, I call these brand new expired listings and they're so mad. I can't even get into a conversation with them. And it's a result of all these agents using this crap that we just spent the last 30 minutes talking about that has just pissed off the consumer so much so. Now, there's still a way to combat that. That's for another episode. But it's because we're not making people feel comfortable. When we communicate with the prospect, they feel like they're being sold to. So we are the ones that elicit their defensiveness. It's not that these people are bad people. It's just that we are bad salespeople.